Hi friends, Dr. Mark here to answer your questions and also give you the best health tips. In this video, let's answer this common question. Does the HIV virus die when exposed to air? Alright, let's begin. It is important to bear in mind that whilst HIV may live for some time outside the body, HIV transmission has not been reported as a consequence of contact with spillages of blood, semen, or other body fluids. Although many health workers do come into contact with HIV-infected body fluids. Nevertheless, awareness of the possible persistence of viral HIV in body fluids will encourage observation of infection control procedures. Laboratory studies which have looked at the survival of HIV have found that HIV is sensitive to higher temperatures, but not to extreme cold. Experiments have shown that HIV is killed by heat, but temperatures over 60 degrees Celsius are needed to achieve reliable killing of HIV. Levels of virus remain relatively stable in blood at room temperature, and HIV may persist for at least a week in dried blood at 4 degrees Celsius. Blood containing HIV used for laboratory experiments is stored at -70 degrees Celsius without any loss of viral activity. HIV may survive for up to 4 weeks in syringes after HIV-infected blood has been drawn up into the syringe and then flushed out. A study of blood gathered from more than 800 syringes filled with small amounts of HIV-infected blood and stored for various periods found that HIV could be isolated from 10% of the syringes after 11 days, where the quantity of blood was less than 2 microliters, but also in 53% of syringes, where the blood quantity was 20 microliters. Longer survival of HIV was also associated with lower storage temperatures of less than 4 degrees Celsius. At higher temperatures of 27 to 37 degrees Celsius, survival was not detected beyond 7 days. HIV is very sensitive to changes in alkalinity or acidity or pH level, and pH levels below 7 or above 8 are unsuitable for long-term survival of HIV. It is interesting that one reason why HIV transmission may be less likely in healthy women is due to the acidity of vaginal secretions. HIV may survive in dried blood at room temperature for up to 5 or 6 days, provided that the optimum pH level is maintained. Drying of blood does not seem to affect the effectivity of HIV. Wondering about sewage? Sewage is highly unlikely to pose a risk because infectious HIV has never been isolated from feces or urine. However, a research published has shown that HIV can survive for several days in sewage in the laboratory. And more important fact is that HIV does not survive as long as other viruses in seawater. And more importantly, HIV has been recovered from human corpses between 11 and 16 days after death in bodies stored at the usual mortuary temperature of 2 degrees Celsius. It is unclear how long infectious HIV may persist in corpses left to decay at normal room temperature, but HIV has been cultured from organs stored at 20 degrees Celsius up to 14 days after death. HIV was not detected in significant quantities later than 16 days, implying that buried corpses or those preserved for long periods pose less of a risk to undertakers and pathologists. No studies have investigated the survival of HIV in semen outside the body as such, but studies which have sought to culture HIV from semen in the laboratory have often found it difficult to do so, indicating the low quantities often present in semen. These findings do not take into account factors such as the dose of virus necessary to establish infection or the chance that the virus will reach the target cells, assuming that the skin is injured. Just because an individual comes into contact with tiny quantities of HIV in dried blood, it does not follow that infection will occur. The effect of environmental conditions such as wind, rain, etc. is not taken into account in these laboratory-based studies. Concerns about contact with blood from corpses may be more realistic depending on the quantities of blood present and given the evidence for long-term survival of HIV after death. A 2003 review in Australia concluded that HIV can survive outside the human body for periods up to several weeks. But viral survival is influenced by quantities of the virus, volume of blood, ambient temperature, exposure to sunlight, and humidity. The review focused on the risk of transmission following injuries with syringes discarded by drug users and noted that there had been no reported transmissions of either HIV or viral hepatitis in Australia. Hope the question, does HIV virus die when exposed to air? Or how long does HIV survive in open air has been answered very well. Any comments? Share with us below this video. And friends, please like this video or share with your loved ones. Thanks for visiting Mark Medicals.